Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Alan Zakin. I chair, as a volunteer, chair the Government Affairs Committee for the Morris Chamber. I have a PR firm and I've counsel to a law firm in the great town of Florham Park, equally great with your other 38 towns. Hopefully you all participate in the chamber. I know many of you have before. We have a very active Chamber Government Affairs Committee. We've had leaders from all over the state, from Senate President Sweeney to obviously Senator Kane and John Bramnick, Republican leaders who represent this area, Senator Oraho and Assembly Speaker Coughlin. And we have had some of you as mayors participate. And we also have an active EDC that our President Megan Hunter used to chair. And before that, she was in a municipal EDC, many of you know, in Morris County. The chamber has done quite a bit to help business work together with government and help businesses and government. And now not just chamber businesses, but a lot of the businesses in some of your local towns that wouldn't necessarily join the county chamber might be involved in their local chambers. And a big part of that is this task force to produce a plan to use science and objective metrics to promote the opening of businesses safely and effectively in conjunction with Senator Bucco. And we've always planned out to reach out to obviously the statewide officials, but also work with the local officials and find out what's going on in your communities. So with that, I will turn it over as an asset in addition to Megan, who was the EDC experience. You all know Mike Stanzilis is a mayor and also has the business experience. So it's a really great team at the chamber. And I'll turn it over to Mike.
Great, thanks, Alan. So good evening, everyone, and thank you all so much for being here. It's really awesome to see such a group of mayors. Getting this together was like herding cats with getting this many mayors together at the same time. I see a few chuckles out there already. But you know what's great about this is a real nonpartisan group, and COVID doesn't know any party. So I think what's wonderful about this is that we all have something in common, and that is the health, both physically and economically, of our constituents. So if you like what happens tonight and you want to do this again, let me know. We can maybe think, I'd like to propose we do something quarterly perhaps with all the different mayors and see where it takes us. Full disclosure, my day job, as Alan mentioned, is with the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also the mayor of Mount Darlington. And so March 16th is when the chamber closed their doors and opened up the virtual chamber. And since then, we've been doing 2, 3, 4 virtual meetings a day. We've been convening for our members, facilitating, educating. And tonight, this is about advocacy. So we've been doing a lot of advocacy, more than we've ever done on the federal, state, and local level for our membership, which is the business community, and the business community writ large in the region. So with this, we put together this task force with Senator Bucco, and we have a star-studded group of people on the task force, which includes the chairperson, Bruce Grove, who's an industrial hygienist. If you've never heard that word before, you're going to hear it a lot now. And Bruce was bamboozled into doing this for us. And thank you so much, Bruce, for being part of this. So I'm going to hand it over to Senator Bucco. What I ask is that you mute your phones, and if you have a question, this is a Q&A style, so don't hesitate to interrupt us with your questions or type it in the chat. For introductions, just type your name and your municipality and say hello to everybody in the chat. And let's have a great spirited discussion this evening, and let me know if you want to do this again. Thank you so much. Senator Bucco.
Thanks, Mayor, and good evening, mayors. You know, I want to take a moment to thank the Chamber and the task force for really putting together what I think is one of the premier reports that has come out of this pandemic. And, you know, these are unprecedented times. And about 3 weeks ago, I contacted the Chamber and asked them if they were interested in putting together a panel of experts, including scientists and business leaders from every segment of the economy. And the Chamber jumped in with both feet. And I can tell you that the folks that participated and that worked on this report, the report really shows the quality of the folks that were involved. You know, we are at a critical juncture right now in our state, and you know that in your towns. I speak to small businesses every day. And for many, the day is rapidly approaching when they're going to have to decide whether they close their doors forever For some, unfortunately, that day has already come, and we'll never get those small businesses back. But we have an opportunity here to send a message to the governor that both the public health and the economic health can coexist. And if it doesn't, the long-term impacts from this crisis will have rippling effects for many, many years to come. The loss in revenue is staggering already, and that will certainly have an impact on our schools, on our social services programs, on municipal aid, on property taxes. You know, it just goes on and on and on. And we cannot afford for New Jersey to become any more unaffordable. We just can't allow that to happen. What you'll see in this report and what you'll hear tonight is that this report was the first risk-based analysis on the various segments of the economy that clearly proves that most of the businesses that are closed right now could be operating today in a more safe fashion than the businesses that are open. And the governor, really, that pressure really has to be put on the governor so that he understands that many of these things, many of these businesses can be open safely and should have been open safely probably 2 weeks ago. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bruce Groves, who, as Mayor Stanzoulis indicated, is an industrial hygienist. He was the one that chaired this committee. He's done a great job in doing a lot of research, bringing other experts to the table. Like I said, the report that was ultimately produced is something that we should all be proud of. And we need to start sharing it. We need to start sharing it with our small businesses, and we need to get it out into the community and suggest that the community shares it, but most importantly, use it to put the pressure on the front office to get the governor to move in a more quick fashion to get the economy open again. So Bruce, without any further ado, you know, if you could just give an overview of the report, I'd appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And, oh, geez. I want to make sure I can find it here, right? Okay, hold on one second here. One of the things is an introduction as I, hold on. All right. You think, Tony, I would have had this worked out perfectly after the number of times you've done it. Can everybody see the screen at this point? Can somebody?
Yeah, I got it. We can see it.
Okay. I'm going to go through this in about 8 or 9 minutes. This is a tease. There's a report. You can get a copy of the full PowerPoint slides. You can get a copy of the list. And when I was asked to chair this, this happens to be in my core competency. The business I'm in is exposure assessment. I've been doing this for over 30 years. When you hit 40 years, you don't say 40 years anymore. You say over 30 years. Okay, so you go backwards on that. But the whole aspect of what I do for a living is to understand what the hazard is, what the exposure, what the concentration, what the dose is. And viruses do the same thing. And that's the whole point of it, is that this is not a carpet bombing approach that everybody gets one virus and gets sick. There are people who have gotten significant exposures, the super spreaders, and they have gotten bad reactions as a result of this. And there's a lot of us that have been exposed to this virus. I mean, that's what viruses are. So I'm going to talk about let me keep to the slides here. We had a big group. I'm also on the board of the Morris County Chamber. And that's where Michael kind of twisted my arm. No good deed goes unpunished, as they say. But I decided to take a whole different approach because everybody in the world has got a return to work program. And what I was seeing is that there's absolute chaos out here when it comes to which industry is going to be opened, which industry is going to be closed. So we took a different approach and tried to actually determine which are the most hazardous industries and which are industries that are not hazardous, are relatively low hazard with regards to the transmission of this virus. And I grabbed a couple of people here. Michael helped me out in finding so at least Joan, who is an ex-CEO of a hospital system, and that she could help us through some of the hospital speak. And a colleague of mine who's an ex-CDC, ATSDR toxicologist, pathologist, and I'm what is known as a certified industrial hygienist. I would say, especially after this quarantine, we're heavyweights, okay, with regards to this specific issue. So we've worked with people in DEP in the States, so this was not done anecdotally here. The question that we have is how do we know when it's right to open the economy, and when it is time, how do we do it safely? This is the only slide I have with regards to how do we know it's time to open the economy. We had a more detailed presentation that showed the current statistics in Morris County. We showed some of the reduction in cases. We showed the ratio of negative tests to positive tests. These are all criteria that the CDC that gives you an indication that we're way down on the downward trend with regards to this curve. So the time to go from crisis mode, and you know, I'm not arguing that we shouldn't have taken a crisis mode back in March when things were happening, but that's a time to pivot and say we now have to judiciously get back to work. So the basic scorecard here is we identified what is known as transmission risk. And transmission risk, and it developed a scorecard. And something like this, you want to make it simple. When you talk about transmission risk, this is where social distancing comes to play. This is where two people are interacting, you know, and you want to make sure that one person can't transmit the virus to another. And you can determine what the risk is depending on how much time a person spends with another person and the proximity. And then we looked at the mitigation steps to make it simple, that if you happen to be a risk of a 1, then you have to follow the mitigation steps of a 1. 2, you have to do 1 and 2, and so on. And then once we've identified the generic risk, we kind of make an action item, a call to action for industry to say, this is what you have to do. And we all know what we have to do with regards to social distancing and disinfections and such. What are the specific areas that need to be addressed for your industry? You know, I didn't want to know what a car dealership has to do in their showroom. It's more important that the dealership, once they know the performance requirements, that they can write their own procedures. How we did this is that there's a code system out there that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has had around. They used to be called the SIC codes, for some of us been around for a while. They're now called the NAICS industry codes. And this is the code system that's used to do a lot of statistics. And just showing an example here, it gets up to 6 digits. We only looked at the first 4 digits. You're seeing the 2 digits here on the screens. For utilities, for example, are 22. So when you go to electrical utilities, there's 2 more digits that go beyond that. So you get a little bit of granularity with some of these industries. And what we ended up doing is we took a risk ranking system, 1 to 4. 1 is low, 4 is extreme. We looked at each one of these 312 risk numbers, and we looked at transmission risk at 2 levels. We looked at between worker and worker, because a lot of industry doesn't have to deal with customers, okay? They're dealing with fellow workers. And we looked at worker with customer. And we also expanded the same thing as customer with customer. So you got 2 columns here. One is worker to worker, and that tends to be either the same or lower than when you're dealing with a worker to customer. We did collaborate with a group out of Wisconsin. They had and Michael Stanzilis was instrumental of helping us collaborate with the chamber group out there. And then we took this chart. We did a quality assurance. I got my team together, and we made sure that the numbers made sense. If you're not in the risk business, basically what we're dealing here is what we're all concerned about is the probability. What's the risk? The probability of contracting COVID-19, the illness. And that is dependent on the hazard itself, which is the virus, and what kind of exposure you get, the frequency and duration. And it's a very simple formula. And we ended up with the ranking system. We looked at one being minimal, where most people don't have to get close to people. You can work and you don't have to deal with the general public. Moderate, where you may have frequent short-term passing contact with coworkers, but you can usually maintain self-distancing, social distancing, which is greater than 6 feet with coworkers in the public. Significant, and think of your checkout person and ShopRite, where you have frequent sustained contact with coworkers or the public, often at times not being able to maintain self-distancing of 6 feet. And the last one is extreme. And what we're dealing here mostly are people whose job is to work with sick people, people who are ill with COVID-19. And that's mostly the healthcare business, okay? And associated support groups in the healthcare business. So here you got a number, just to give some examples of what's minimal. We put most construction is minimal. Doesn't mean that people historically weren't going to get together to drink coffee or go to a lunch truck or something. Well, if you can pull that out of it, that most of the time they would have minimal transmission risk, and they never should have been shut down. Most manufacturing, professional offices, these are all considered minimal transmission risk. Moderate, you're dealing with some retail. And lawn and garden shops, for example, nurseries, car dealerships, banks. Significant, this is where most of the retail, and I put in here grocery, 45 plus, because we did a little head count of how many grocery stores, and I'm not even sure we went into the quick checks and things like this, that were open during the whole pandemic, okay? Same thing with liquor stores. Hair salons, airlines, restaurants, bars, schools, these are the ones that are the most significant risk. And they're the ones where most of the resources and effort needs to happen. And then high, you're dealing with what you would think it would be, which is the physician and dentist offices, hospitals, nursing and long-term care. So once you have the mitigation procedures, it says the minimal ones are, here are the generic requirements: routine cleaning, you got some training, risk communication, you try to keep people from congregating, and this is what industry should happen. You get into the second one where you're doing the first mitigation step, but now you're actually looking at what kind of PPE are you gonna have people use, okay? You want to make sure you expand maybe your routine cleaning. You limit your occupancy. We said 75% of the fire code capacities. Staggered shifts. And then you may have a gatekeeper procedure of something where, you know, you want to make sure that people who are ill, people who may have their temperature, you know, whatever makes sense for your industry, you have some sort of gatekeeper. The area, which if you stand looking at some of retail, this is where you do the first step, the second step, and you also are going to have more mandatory PPE guidelines. In the second area, it could be more voluntary. Employee screening, more rigid screening of employees. You want to make sure that you know how to handle a positive COVID case. And they might end up opening up your stores or open up your restaurants to 50% of the fire code. So I'm not going to go into healthcare. That has kind of a special lens, since this is a quick cost, but a quick presentation. But what we want to basically do is the scorecard. Every business can look up their own NAICS code, and they can determine what their risk is. And so then you correlate that to what the mitigation steps. And you start looking at anybody who has mitigation that requires PPE assessments. If you happen, I'll use the auto again, the various auto associations are putting out their own plans, and you want to cross-reference what works for you to use in your specific industry itself. If you have no industry-based groups, small business, Main Street, then this is where we can help them out and develop these plans that make sense for small businesses themselves. So the story here is, and this is good news, 80% of all industries using this coding system have a risk baseline of minimal, 70%, or moderate, 10%. And many are still closed, and that's a travesty. 15% have a risk baseline of significant. And they've been open, many of these have been open since the beginning of the pandemic, okay? Big box stores, grocery stores, the Walmarts out there. And of course, 5% have a risk baseline of high, and that's the healthcare business. So the point we tried to make for the governor and for Senator Bucco to take is now's the time to not have a process that doesn't make any sense, but look from a risk-based standpoint, and it's right here to open up those industries that are a 1, a 2, and a 3 with mitigation steps. All right.
So thank you.
That's a speed dating of my presentation.
You know, it's great presentation, Bruce, and thank you. And really, that last slide was the money slide, you know, of where we are and how many businesses could be open. So I'd like to open it up to questions, comments. I know that when you get a room of mayors together, we could talk forever. So whoever I hear first, jump right out with your questions. Unmute yourself.
I'm going to go if nobody else. Mark Taylor.
Mark Taylor.
Senator Bucco, it was bantered in the last governor's call about this $50 million state aid that's going to come out for small business. I had a call with Mike Delameter, is that how you say it?
Yep. He's Deputy Chief of Staff.
Yesterday, and seemingly the money is going to 9 counties, and the 9 counties do not include the county of Morris. So, you know, based on businesses that I'm seeing in my own town, and I shared this with Mike Senzelis a little while ago today, that, you know, I have a business here in town that's a not-for-profit. They open their doors merely to give away gifts in an effort to help communities and help people. Their business is suffering immensely and they need money. And I'm trying to help her with some of this $50 million to get something to help her business. When I learned that 9 counties are getting the money, that's distressing to me.
Listen, I was not aware that it was limited to 9 counties, but I can tell you now that I am, I'm going to find out right away. If that's the case, that's just ridiculous. You know, I can't imagine, I mean, I can imagine why they're not including Morris County, but I'm hoping that it's not based on a political reason. You know, so I will find out immediately. This is the first that I'm hearing of this.
Thank you.
I have just one thing, you know, as a different way to look at this, Senator, you mentioned in your comments about, you know, people leaving the states. As a realtor, like, I'll give you an example. Today, I get a call from a woman in New York City who someone gave her my name. She's looking to rent a place out here for July and August. She's willing to pay $25,000. She needs a pool, a couple of bedrooms, and some green play space for her kids to be able to play because they need to get out of the city. I've had
Well,
another.
I'll tell you what, she can use my house. I'll put the pool up tomorrow.
I mean, there's another realtor
With
in
that
my office.
kitchen?
The people are willing to pay $50,000. So this is almost like an opportunity for the state really to put on a show as to why maybe you want to move out here permanently if you're not going to have to work in your offices. So that's another reason that we should have more open so that people can see really what the lifestyle is living in Morris County or Somerset County or Hunterdon County, whatever county it might be.
One of the things that came out of the discussions in putting this report together is the fact that Morris County will probably see in some of the suburban areas a big uptick, not only in residential rentals, but also in commercial space, because many of the big companies that have headquarters in New York City will not be able to have the type of space to social distance, and their employees that live out here are not going to want to take mass transit into the city. So I think you're going to see a big uptick in open commercial space here as those companies decide to come out here for cheaper space and to keep their employees safe by keeping them out of the mass transit system.
Just on the real estate end, just piggybacking on what Janet said, I mean, one house over the weekend here in Morris Plains had 11 offers, and 9 of them were from Hoboken, Jersey City, and New York City. So, I mean, I think that's 100% right.
Senator, I want to commend you and the members of this committee. You know, it amazes me in Washington Township that I can drive to my Target on one end of my town on a Saturday, and I can walk from one hood of the car to the next to the next to the next because they're so packed in. And it's a super Target, so they have groceries, but same thing with Walmart. But Main Street in Mayor Hoven's town or the small shops in my town or in Hackett's town, they're not permitted to open the same goods and services. And it's incredibly frustrating to see this type of thing when now all the statistic data is coming out that's saying that outdoor places are more safe. The smaller retailers are just as much of a risk, whether it's a 1 or a 2, as the large retailers. And you know, what can we do? Because we continue to be told on our calls with the governor's office that we expect guidance on this, that, and the other thing any day now, but we're not getting it. We're just not getting anything on camps, outdoor play. They open the parks, but then they don't support the parks. So our municipalities are flooded with people coming out here to get, like Mayor Hoven said, the open space, and our police departments are overburdened trying to deal with it. And our businesses just can't open. 1 in 4 businesses said today in I forget where I read it, Wall Street Journal, is going to be out of business if it isn't by now.
Well, listen, you raised a great point, and today the entire Senate Republican caucus sent a letter to the governor, you know, requesting that he start giving this direction. He did say this afternoon on a call with the entire legislature that we could expect something by June 1st. So I'm hopeful that he's going to start going down this road and start giving a little bit more guidance. But, you know, we've got no control over the administration, and, you know, New Jersey's governor is one of the most powerful in the country. That may change, by the way, as a result of this pandemic. But that's why people are so frustrated, because a lot of these things are inconsistent. A lot don't make a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things I saw before he announced about allowing outdoor graduations, in-person outdoor graduations, was a mom posted on her Facebook page that she was encouraging the Board of Education and the superintendent of her school to get the diplomas and stand at the entrance to Costco and have the graduates line up in front of the entrance to go in. And they could have their graduation right there, and it would be in complete compliance with the governor's order. So, you know, when you start hearing these things and you start looking at these things, you know, early on when I was saying it made no sense that I could call a restaurant and go to the restaurant, park in front, have my meal put in the trunk, but at the same time I couldn't call a shop on Main Street and have them, you know, and order something and have them put the goods in the back of my car. Just didn't make any sense. And now, after so many weeks of this and so many people struggling, that's why people are really starting to get frustrated, and people are starting to act out. And I think the governor is feeling the pressure. And that's why I say to you, you know, this report proves everything that we're seeing. And the more people's hands we can get it into, and the more people that can take it and call the governor's office and say, hey, I've got a small business, I got a level 2 risk analysis, but yet you're sending me to the grocery store, which is level 4. I mean, we just got to keep making these common sense arguments and keeping the pressure on.
Senator, within that light, when businesses and or the town pool per se are going to open, we can't hear about that on a Friday, and Monday it's going to happen, because this all takes preparation, as you know. Even with the graduations, it's going to take preparation. So there needs to be a clear-cut path to what's going to open when, and not the day before or an hour and a half and it's going to open. It's not working.
Yeah, that's another great point. You know, it's you know, I've said an awful lot that, you know, each day we get a 1 o'clock surprise, and you know, it's just not helping anybody. I mean, everybody's happy that that segment of the economy is going to be open, but it's now going to take them 2 days or 3 days to get prepared. I was on the phone with one of the laboratories, and the owner said to me, you know, he was out testing the lakes and beaches to allow folks to go ahead and go swimming. And he said to me, he's like, I just don't understand it. I'm out there texting lakes and beaches where there's a greater risk of somebody getting sick than going into a chlorinated pool, you know. And again, you know, he's a scientist. Doesn't make any sense. Just doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, Senator. This is Guy in Long Hill. So Megan and Alan and Mike, thanks for organizing this. I'd like to focus on that category 3 as regards restaurants. And I speak to a lot of mayors, as all of you do, and we come up with ideas that we might be able to employ in our individual towns that can help restaurants when they're allowed to open. Can we come up with a holistic recommendation or a list so we don't all do it in a piecemeal fashion? So, you know, what are the recommendations that we can do or employ that will help the restaurants, because they have been devastated in Long Hill, and I'm sure throughout all of the county and the state.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great suggestion. You know, look, there's a couple of things. One is every municipality zoning ordinances will have to be examined to make sure that you are going to allow outside seating and dining. The ABC has guidelines. I did some research on this. I had the Office of Legislative Service look into it. It's my understanding that if you have a consumption license like the restaurants do, that as long as you are selling alcohol on the licensed premises, that you're okay. So as long as the restaurant owner owns the property where the license is located, it appears to me like that's going to be okay for them to operate under their license outside. So these are all the things that are going to have to be addressed and should be addressed. But think about this as well, because I was on the phone today with a catering facility, and the same is going to be true, I think, for the restaurants. There's no greater ability to contact trace than the restaurants and the catering facilities. Why? Because you're going to have to call for a reservation, you're going to have to give your name, and you're going to have to, and then you're going to be assigned a table. So if anything happens, that contact tracing is built right into that service industry. So these are things that I'm not sure that the governor's office is focusing on, because he's, you know, he's concentrating on this contact tracing and having to have the ability to make sure if somebody gets sick, they can figure it out. Boy, you know, that may be a level 3 facility, but they've got the contact tracing built right in.
Thank you, Senator.
And the one point I think that that we wanted to drive through is that there are levels of risk. There are ways to control this risk to bring it down to well within acceptable limits, and that's the whole process. You don't just shut it down. There's you can do it.
And that was exactly what I was trying to get at. Maybe I didn't articulate it. Can we come up with a list that is specific to restaurants so all of us are more than familiar with what we will recommend in our respective municipalities?
If you look at the report or the slides, the mitigation slide that I have for number 3, you got to do 1, 2, and 3, and it basically is the generic requirements that have to be put into restaurants. Okay, and this is the most conservative. We want to open them up first, and then we can start lessening it down. So they're right there generically. Now, what does a restaurant do? You want to take those and make them much more restaurant specific. And that I think would be helpful with people who own restaurants and run restaurants to say what really makes sense.
So perfect. Would you recommend that we send that, or can we send the report that you produced? And thank you, by the way, for doing so. Can we forward that to our local chambers and then they can forward it to the restaurant owners for their review?
Sure, absolutely. And the other thing is, the Restaurant Association, which represents all of the restaurants in the state of New Jersey, the Restaurant Association has already established protocols that they've delivered to the governor's office that they feel will best protect not only their employees, but the patrons. So I can also get you a copy if you want of the Restaurant Association's recommendation, and I will ask them if they've put together any materials on what they would hope the municipalities collectively could do to help them open up a little bit smoother.
That would be great. Thank you.
It would. It would be. I have a couple of questions here. Kathy Wilson, Morris Township. I think your report is very interesting and very well done. And I was hoping to read more of the details before tonight. I have not had a chance to do that. But I remember you at the first meeting talking about you had consulted with people in each of the different industries, and you're just now talking about restaurants. And I'm thinking of for example, the salons where they cut hair and that. And I think it would be very helpful to have, you know, recommendations that originated at that with that business coming out and being shared. And my question is that in your more detailed report, or is that just something you mentioned? I mean, is there something in writing in there that by each individual business industry, particular recommendations?
In the individual report, yeah, in Mayor, in the individual report, we do not have each industry's protocol, but or mitigation factors, but each industry has developed them. So it's not going to, what we had suggested is that once the report got filed and sent to the governor, that each industry begin to compile those mitigation requirements based on their industry and provide them to the chamber, and that we would disseminate them.
So just to clarify, the tail wagging the dog type thing was, we put the generic requirements depending on your risk level. If you happen to be, go back to the car dealership, and you already have your procedure that's been out there, what we want you to do is look at your current procedure and then look at what the generic requirements is and check off the box. You meet all the requirements. And if you do, then you're free to go. And you find that the restaurant, everybody's writing these things, and it's a little chaotic. Now we have a standard that needs to be looked at. This is what you need to do from a performance requirements. Make sure your specific industry meets those requirements.
Yes. And has this report been shared with the governor, or you're planning to do that? What is the status of that?
What was that? I missed that. I'm sorry, Mayor.
Have you shared it with the governors?
Yes, I sent a letter to the governor on May 19th, last Tuesday, providing him with a copy of the report and the risk analysis for each industry.
Mike, Megan, I believe a reporter asked the governor about it at a press conference. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, it is.
or
Yeah,
Senator?
he did ask him and he said he had received it but hadn't looked at it yet.
Thank you.
You can find a copy of the report, the PowerPoint, and the NAICS code risk matrix on the Morris County Chamber of Commerce website also. And it should be disseminated as much as possible so that people are armed with data and an understanding of where they are in the risk matrix to get themselves some pressure to get us all back open. So for the mayors, I mean, we all do have some retail and some restaurants. So what, you know, what's happening with your retail? I'm sure it's getting crushed out there, right, Tom or Michael? You're muted.
Michael?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Tom. Mike.
Yeah, most of the retail is it's just barely hanging on. Most of them are closed or they're just limping along with a little pickup, curbside pickup. I'm worried about most of them even open up, whether they'll ever open up again. At least the restaurants are selling something right now.
Yeah.
You know, just one point of thought also is I think you have to get residents and people comfortable also going out to these establishments, whether it's a restaurant or retail. I'm sure people are still going to be jittery going into these establishments, whether they're, you know, following all the protocols or what have you. So it's a matter of giving confidence back to the consumer.
It's a good point.
That it's okay to go in these stores now. So I think that's
Yeah,
going to be a major push that somebody has to put out.
That's a great point, Mayor, and that's why this report will help in that regard, because, you know, the individual establishments are going to have to convey to the public and to their customers that it's safe for them to come to their establishment. And if they're following the protocols and people see that, they'll come. If they don't, then you're right. You know, people will make decisions not to go back to those particular establishments. That's why I think that, you know, putting it in their hands is okay, because they're going to want to do the best that they can to make their customers happy and to make them comfortable in order for them to get their clientele and their businesses back.
So quickly going back to a point that Mayor Hoven brought up earlier, you know, Jeff Hipschman from CBRE was on this committee, and he's and other large real estate management companies are indicating that there's going to be a westward migration from New York City and Jersey City, Hoboken area out here. Mayor Hoven already sees that happening, but from a commercial real estate point as well. So Morris County is really, I think we're really well positioned to capitalize on that westward migration. And, you know, we're probably going to see it coming. People don't want to ride in subways and trains in New York City. I have family in New York City. They're not going to be getting on crowded elevators, which most of their jobs are above the 3rd or 4th floor. So that's not an easy thing for them. So I think we are in a good spot here in Morris County to experience the potential growth in the commercial real estate, which hopefully will have a trickle out effect on our restaurants and our retail.
You know, the chamber and I have put out a press release, you know, supporting the report and seeking additional support from other folks. Any of the mayors that want to join on to that release, we're happy to take your names and, you know, give us a quote and we'll add them.
All right, thanks. Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to say, like I said, from the chamber perspective, and Mike and Megan, please chime in, but because this report is so important and working together, and appreciate the large number of mayors, and it's not a Republican or Democrat issue, it's just a jobs and survival and business issue. If more forums are appropriate, we bring in, you mentioned local chambers of commerce to tie in with them, or to talk about economic development. Certainly, again, not speaking for Mike or Megan, but we're open to that, to get the word out about this plan and about doing what we can to safely get all these businesses back as quickly as possible.
Great. Any
Senator,
other? Go ahead.
yeah, just Senator, just what were you just discussing about the mayor signing on to? I didn't catch the first part.
The chamber, we put out a press release, and
Okay.
you know, I think the more people that join in support of this report and what it stands for, I think that the more pressure that we put on the administration to move a little quicker. So any of the mayors that want to sign on to that release, get us a quote and we'll be happy to add John.
Okay, thank you.
Could you
Tony-
send us is it out there, or could you send
Yeah,
it?
Mayor Wilson, the
Copy
report
of
is
that?
on the Chamber of Commerce website, all three PowerPoint, the next
Press
matrix,
release is on there?
the press release. Yeah,
No,
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 it's
is the
not.
press release on there?
Megan,
I
do
don't-
you remember? We'll
I
get
don't
you the
know,
press.
Mike.
Are we able to email that out to all the participants today, Mike? Are we able to email a link to everything?
Yeah,
or
we could get a link to that press release.
That would
Senator,
be helpful. Thank you.
Senator, I'd be glad to give you my name, and I'll send you a quote. I think it's really important that we start, the government and the state start releasing positive information so that people do get the confidence to go back and get out and about. Right now, it's all caution, 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 and it should be, but it's a fine balance. And people are never going to go, you know, the letters I get in my office, I'm reading them. You got people who are scared to death to go out anywhere, and people who we got to go back to work, we got to go back to work, we got to go back to work, and it's a fine balance. And but when you know, we just got off the hospital call, and the hospitals are dying for business because people are afraid to go to the hospital. People are afraid to go to the hospital, and the hospital's got nobody going in there. All right, so I mean, you gotta encourage people that life's got to get back to normal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you're 100% right.
The nurse, and it's a shame because they screwed it. It was all screwed up. It's the nursing homes. That's where the deaths are occurring, at the nursing homes and the VA hospitals. The center up in Lincoln Park and up in Andover. You know, it's horrible what happened in those places. I know, my daughter runs one. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So I mean, you know, that's where the bulk of them are occurring. And when St. Clair's is down to, they have them all in one ward, one section, and people are afraid to go to St. Clair's. So I mean, we got to figure out a way to get people just some resemblance of life. But what's good about your plan is it tells you what's going to come ahead. I'll get your quote tomorrow, Senator.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
My pleasure.
Any other questions, comments? All right, so you can find this on the Morris County Chamber of Commerce website. I'm going to hand it back to Alan to close it, and then to Megan Huncher for some comments, and then Senator Bucco will close it out. But Bruce Groves from MLCOT, thank you so much for the amazing work you did, and I know you put a lot of time into this. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Bruce.
It was a pleasure.
Okay, Bruce, thank you very much. Mike Stanzilis, thank you very much. And to all of our bipartisan group of mayors that signed on, and to Senator Bucco, it's a great bipartisan effort just to try to get people back to work. I just want to mention, as head of government affairs, and speaking of bipartisanship, we're having another committee meeting. We're focusing on COVID, which is general, how government and business can work together. And it's featuring the Biotechnology Committee. The chairman of that in the Assembly is Andrew Zwicker, who's in neighboring Somerset County. And then his co-chair is Assemblyman Krista Phillips, who has a couple towns in Morris County. And that'll be an important issue as we're trying to create jobs from some of those lost with technology regarding tracing and disease management and prevention, mitigation, regard biopharma and the pharmaceutical industry, and County College and Bruin Fairleigh Dickinson or other great colleges will come into that. So we're going to have a forum about that. It's this Friday. It's on the Chamber website. If you're on our government affairs list or want to email us, we'll get it to you. It's from noon to 1 p.m., 1 hour quick Zoom event. And I will turn it over to Megan now for any comments.
Great, thank you, Alan. So I just want to piggyback off of what Alan was saying. We actually have an update from the county's Office of Emergency Management on Friday at 10 a.m. So we will have a couple of speakers just updating us on COVID testing. And I know some of you have already been briefed by Atlantic Health. So this should be also an interesting update. We have Tom Bracken, who is the state chamber president, speaking next Thursday. He's on a number of task forces at the state and the regional meaning state, regional level. So we're looking forward to hearing him speak. And I did want to add that the chamber is a part of the New Jersey Business and Industry Association Coalition. So they have compiled additional information on their website, which is available to the public. So, you know, really, it's just a proud moment for us as a chamber during this challenging time. I know Mayor Andy, as you mentioned, the need to be positive. So we're taking this step to be on the forefront of providing guidance to businesses as well as to good policy. So I'm very grateful for Senator Bucco for approaching us to do this together. And of course, we're blessed to have Bruce Groves, a member of our chamber. I mean, we know New Jersey has highest concentration of professional and scientific talent anywhere in the world. And so thank you, Bruce, for all of your time and dedication. Thank you, Michael, for spearheading this on behalf of the chamber. As we've transitioned to a virtual chamber, I do encourage all of you to participate in any seminars. I know you all have, most of you have day jobs, so if there's anything that can better inform you as professionals and also help your constituents and businesses, please feel free to refer them to us and our website. Most of our seminars are in the form of videos, and they're actually free on our video library. And we actually interviewed Senator Bucco to launch our chamber TV. So we do have an interview with the senator as well. So we're excited about some of the new innovative things we're doing at the chamber to continue to help our members and businesses in the county. So thank you all for your time this evening. And yes, we do have a number of items related to this on our website, but I think Michael would probably be better if we just email it to everyone because they're in different places on the website. So instead of having you hunt for it, we'll send it to you in one email. So thank you again.
Thank you, Megan. And I just want to say thank you to the chamber and to everyone coming on, the task force, Bruce Groves. This says an awful lot about the Morris County Chamber and what it's able to do with its members. You know, Mike, you've done a great job, and mayors, I hope that you'll utilize the report to help your downtowns and your business communities. And anybody that wants to have a conversation with me, any of the mayors, about particular issues offline, most of you have my cell number. Just give me a call. I'm happy to do whatever I can to get whatever answers you need during these unprecedented times. So thanks again. I really appreciate it. I think this really put not only Morris County, but the chamber, Morris County Chamber on the map in terms of the professionalism and the quality of this report and the attention that it's received statewide.